Peter Parker becomes someone none of us have actually met yet. Spider-Man Brand New Day hits theaters July 31st, and Sony's already put out 3 trailers for it, a batch of leaked script pages made their way online, director Destin Daniel Cretton's been dropping behind-the-scenes photos like clues, and somewhere in Mexico, of all places, a McDonald's ad has half the internet convinced it already spoiled a mutant reveal. That's the entire case file. Every piece of it. None of it is confirmed. Tom Holland's already admitted some of the fan theories floating around are getting uncomfortably close to the truth.
I think I have to keep that a secret.
Which tells you the internet's done more digging than Marvel ever wanted done. So we're going through the evidence ourselves. The suit, the mutation, the mentors, the girl he lost, the villains stacking up, the one threat nobody's cracked yet. Every time we're guessing instead of reporting, you'll know it. By the time you're watching this, some of these questions might already be answered. Others might not be. Not for weeks. With the trailers out and the release closing in, this is what the evidence says. Hey, I'm Mac. Welcome to Mac and Flicks. Start with where Peter actually is, because it's further from where you left him than you'd expect. No Way Home ended with Doctor Strange casting a spell that erased Peter Parker from the world's memory. Everyone who knew him forgot he existed, including MJ and Ned. It saved the multiverse. It also meant Peter chose, deliberately, to disappear from every relationship he had left. The movie opens in 2 jumps. First, the trailers place a prologue roughly 9 months after that spell, and leaked script pages describe Peter drifting through those months like a person slowly fading out of a photograph, there one moment and gone the next, worth treating as unconfirmed, since none of it comes from Marvel directly. Then it jumps again, 4 more years forward, landing the story in the present, with MJ and Ned graduating MIT and moving back to a city that has no memory of ever sharing it with him. Peter had the option to reintroduce himself once the dust settled. He didn't take it. 4 years of protecting a city that has no idea who he is, and he chose that over risking the 2 people he lost. That's distance he's still choosing, every day, on purpose. The apartment matches the choice. Small, rundown, a police scanner instead of Stark satellites, no Avengers Tower, no Strange on speed dial, no Friday running interference. What he's got instead is something he built himself. A rough, homemade AI he calls EV, cobbled together because talking to code is easier than admitting there's nobody left to talk to. It's a kid who used to have Jarvis, faking the feeling of not being alone. There's a real comic precedent here, worth a single sentence. The movie borrows its title from a 2008 comic run, also called Brand New Day, that put Peter through something similar. A bargain that erased his marriage, made in exchange for saving Aunt May's life. Different mechanism, same math. Strip everything back to 0. See who's left standing. The movie swapped a demon's contract for Doctor Strange's spell, but the arithmetic didn't change. Neither did the wardrobe. By the end of No Way Home, Peter's sewing his own suit, classic red and blue, made by hand instead of manufactured. Brand New Day pushes that further. No Stark money, no Stark gadgets, just what a script leak describes as a fabricator, essentially a 3D printer built for one very broke superhero. The colors shifted into something deeper, wine red against a metallic blue instead of the flat palette he's worn since Homecoming, and the webbing sits raised and visible across the fabric instead of smoothed away by CGI. The web shooters are back to being bulky, mechanical, strapped to the outside of his wrists, because there's no invisible nanotech left to hide them in. People are already pointing out how much it resembles Andrew Garfield's suit from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and that's probably not an accident. Marvel Studios' Kevin Feige has described this one as the first MCU Spider-Man movie built entirely around the character's classic elements. Broke, alone, carrying more responsibility than one person should. A suit that looks hand-built by someone with nothing left to prove it with is exactly what that sentence should look like on screen. Run the numbers on how unusual that actually is. Homecoming gave him a Stark-built training suit. Far From Home upgraded it twice, once into a stealth version, once into something closer to full Stark armor. No Way Home ends with him hand-sewing his own for the first time, but even that suit exists because of lessons Stark taught him. 3 films, 3 suits, and every single one of them traces back to Tony Stark in some form. Brand New Day is the first time in the character's entire MCU run where that line gets cut completely. None of it holds. Not for long. Because whatever this fabricator can print, it can't print skin. And Peter's about to find out what happens when the body underneath the suit stops asking permission. 2 comic arcs are doing the heavy lifting here, and only one of them is getting the screen time so far. The one carrying the visuals is called The Other. In the source material, Peter's dying, his own radioactive spider bite finally breaking down at the cellular level, and a vampiric hunter named Morlun tracks him down because he can smell it. Morlun beats Spider-Man to death, plucks out an eye doing it. But something in Peter that isn't quite human anymore claws back to life just long enough to kill Morlun back, and then Peter dies for real. His body ends up in a massive web cocoon under the Brooklyn Bridge. He comes out of it rebuilt. Organic webbing, night vision, a version of himself that finally stopped fighting what he is. Watch the trailers again with that arc in mind, and the footage stops looking random. Peter collapses in his apartment. He wakes up outside the window, suspended in a cocoon he clearly didn't build. His eyes go fully black in the middle of a fight, and whatever's looking out from behind them isn't entirely him anymore. The mechanical web shooters we just spent an entire section on get replaced by webbing that comes straight out of his skin. It's a direct lift, image for image, from a story about a hero who had to die before he'd stop pretending the spider half of him wasn't real. For context on how closely people are already studying this footage, Sony's second trailer reportedly pulled in over 700 million views in its first 24 hours, enough to beat Deadpool and Wolverine's previous record, and by some counts, the 24-hour record set by Grand Theft Auto 6 earlier the same year. That's most of the internet, watching frame by frame. The film seems to be borrowing selectively from what the other actually does to Peter. Inside the cocoon, comic Peter communes with something called the Great Weaver, a kind of cosmic spider deity that forces him to stop fighting the animal half of his own nature and actually accept it. That's the part that matters more than the wrist stingers or the extra strength. The lesson is surrender. If the film is pulling its visuals this directly from that story, it's a fair bet it's pulling the lesson too. And that's a much harder thing for a hero built on control and responsibility to sit with than a new set of abilities. The symptoms match up close to the comics as well. Blackouts, disorientation. In Disassembled, the telepathic infection comes with nosebleeds and bleeding ears. Peter's own spider sense turned into a weapon against him by whoever's causing it. Combine both arcs and you get a fairly precise diagnosis. Something is overloading his senses on purpose, and his body's only defense is to mutate faster than it can be controlled. There's a second arc feeding into this too, one you'll want to keep in the back of your mind for later. It's called Disassembled, and in it, a telepathic mutant infects Spider-Man through nothing more than proximity, forcing a transformation he never agreed to and never saw coming. Hold on to that. It's going to matter a lot more once we get to whoever Sadie Sink is actually playing. For now, the point is simpler and worse. Whatever's happening to Peter is a body doing something its owner didn't sign off on, while its owner is already isolated enough to have nobody to tell. Everything happening to Peter may connect to one actress Marvel has gone to extraordinary lengths to hide. We'll come back to her. So he goes looking for the one person in the MCU who spent over a decade trying to solve exactly that problem for himself. That person is Bruce Banner. And if you've been waiting for the MCU to let the Hulk actually be dangerous again, this is the section you've been waiting for. Banner spent years building towards Smart Hulk. Rage and intellect merged into one stable version of himself, instead of two personalities at war. The trailers show him closer to a professor than an Avenger, using what looks like an inhibitor device to keep his own biology in check. It's the same fight Peter's about to have, years down the road, which is exactly why Peter goes to him. Someone who's actually lived inside the problem, and is still standing. I've wanted an uncontrolled Hulk back in this universe for a long time, and I don't think I'm alone in that. Smart Hulk was a fine idea. In a flat translation on screen, it solved the character's danger instead of dramatizing it. Every piece of footage so far points toward that control slipping. A shot of Hulk sending Spider-Man flying with a single thunderclap. No dialogue, no negotiation. Not what a stable, cooperative Hulk does to a visiting teenager. If the inhibitor fails and Savage Hulk comes back full strength, no leash, that's a decade-old wound this franchise finally deciding to reopen. There's comic precedent for Banner being exactly the wrong person to trust with a cure. In the Six Arms saga, a depressed Peter tries to chemically cure himself of his powers, and the serum backfires. He grows 4 extra arms instead, and it takes an enzyme from Morbius the Living Vampire just to undo it. The lesson's blunt. Trying to science your way out of being Spider-Man tends to make Spider-Man worse. If Banner's inhibitor works anything like that serum, Peter's about to learn it the hard way. For Peter, watching Banner's control slip is a preview. Banner's the version of this story where the monster wins, at least for a while, and Peter's on the exact same track, a few miles behind him. If Peter can't find something to hold on to that isn't the mission, that's where he ends up too. Losing control of your own body is only half the danger here. There's another version of this test that has nothing to do with biology, and it's a lot harder to inhibit. If you're enjoying putting this case together, a like actually helps push it to more people who get into this, and subscribe if you want the next theory breakdown the moment it's out. So if Banner's the warning about the body, Frank Castle is the warning about the mission, and this is the section I've been the most excited to write. The Punisher is a top 3 character for me, full stop, and I think this movie is about to make a lot of converts out of people who've never touched the Netflix run. John Bernthal's played this character before, first in Daredevil's 2nd season, then in his own Netflix run, then again in a Disney Plus special a few years back. Every version up to this point kept him in his own corner of the MCU, orbiting Hell's Kitchen, rarely colliding with anyone in tights. Putting him across from Spider-Man for the first time is the first real test of whether Bernthal's castle can function outside the grim, grounded register he's always been written in. This time, the character's battle van finally gets its live-action debut. A heavily armed mobile command post that's been comic canon for decades and somehow never made it to screen until now. Based out of an industrial barge that serves as his hideout. Makes sense. Castle's never been a guy who wants to be found. The comic relationship between these two goes back to Amazing Spider-Man number 129 in 1974, and it's always run on the same friction. Spider-Man doesn't kill. Castle thinks that rule is the reason more people die. Reportedly, Holland and Cretton leaned into that friction hard enough during filming that they started describing the dynamic as something closer to a big brother and little brother than two vigilantes who can barely stand each other. That tracks with everything the trailers have shown so far. Genuine annoyance sitting right next to genuine trust. The footage gets detailed enough here to slow down for. Peter, mutating, losing control, goes to find MJ. The MJ who doesn't remember a single day they spent together and tells her she's in danger. She agrees to trust him anyway, which is its own small miracle given everything he's already taken from her without her knowing it. He brings her to the one place he's got left, Castle's barge. Tells him he's got nowhere else to go. Over the footage of that moment, Aunt May's voice cuts in, some half-remembered fragment of comfort about being loved for who you are and not for what you can do. She's been dead for years at this point in the timeline, so whether that's a flashback or something closer to a memory Peter's replaying to keep himself steady is still an open question. What isn't open to question is what happens next. MJ, the one person in this entire film who has no idea who Peter used to be to her, is the one who talks Frank Castle into helping him. It might be the whole movie in miniature. A man built entirely around the idea that some people don't deserve saving gets talked into helping the one person on Earth he's spent years dismissing as naive by a woman who doesn't even know why she's doing it. That's the entire ideological argument of this movie happening in one scene, and it's the strongest single piece of footage released so far. Castle's help comes without agreement. Peter's simply out of better options. And for a hero who spent 4 years refusing to ask anyone for anything, that's its own kind of collapse. He's choosing not to be alone anymore, and Castle happens to be who's left standing when he finally asks. There's a third relationship doing quieter work here, and it might end up being the most important one in the whole film. Liza Colon-Zayas, confirmed to be playing NYPD detective Jean DeWolf. DeWolf matters because she's the version of law and order that isn't Frank Castle. In the comics, she's one of the only cops who's ever actually trusted Spider-Man instead of hunting him, which makes her the third point on a triangle Peter's currently standing in the middle of. Banner losing control of his body, Castle having already given up on the system working, and DeWolf still betting that it can. Nothing confirms this gets adapted, but her signature comic arc, The Death of Jean DeWolf, is exactly what it sounds like. She's murdered, and for the first time in decades of comics, Spider-Man doesn't stop at justice. He nearly beats her killer to death. It takes Daredevil pulling him off to stop it. If Marvel's building toward that, Peter's already got a body that might stop asking his permission before he does something he can't undo. Add a grief this size, and the hero who needs someone to physically stop him from crossing a line stops being a hypothetical. And while that plays out, there's a much quieter fight already underway on a completely different front, one that doesn't involve powers or villains at all. Ned Leeds built an app called Spidey Tracker. He spent who knows how long trying to figure out the identity of the hero who saved his life in high school, with absolutely no idea that hero is the best friend he doesn't remember having. That's the kind of detail that only works because we've already watched Peter erase himself. It's tragic because we know something none of the characters do. MJ's storyline cuts deeper, and it's already stirring up a fight online before the movie's even out. The trailers confirm she's got a new boyfriend, played by Iman Esfandi, 4 years into a life that never had Peter in it. Anyone who's read the 2022 comics knows exactly why fans are nervous. Mary Jane spent 4 years trapped in another dimension with a man named Paul, eventually built a life with him, and when Peter finally rescued her, having barely aged a few days himself, he found out she'd moved on without him. Paul became one of the most disliked characters Marvel's put on a page in years. He didn't do anything wrong. He existed purely to keep two people apart who everyone wanted together. For a while, the leading theory was that Esfandi's playing an actual supervillain, Boomerang, which would turn the whole thing into a much lighter, more comedic setup where Peter has to protect a guy he can't stand for MJ's sake. That theory took a hit recently. The director posted a behind-the-scenes photo of the actual actor in the Boomerang suit, and it isn't Esfandi. Tarantula, a masked assassin for hire in the comics, is the live alternate guest now, but honestly, nobody actually knows, including, apparently, most of the people covering this story for a living. One more absence worth one sentence. No Felicia Hardy, no Black Cat. Years of people arguing this exact moment in Peter's life was the perfect entry point for her, and it's not happening. At least not yet. Marvel's betting the emotional stakes work better with MJ carrying all of it alone. Personal threats, moral tests, a body doing things without permission. That's already a full plate. New York's Underworld is about to make it heavier. Kingpin's gone, arrested and politically neutralized after Daredevil Born Again. And crime doesn't stay leaderless in this universe for long. Michael Mando's back as Matt Gargan, the Scorpion, paying off a tease that's been dormant since 2017's Homecoming. 9 years now. Maybe the longest setup to payoff gap this franchise has run. Marvin Jones III plays Tombstone, a crime boss with skin closer to armor than flesh, moving into the vacuum Kingpin left behind. And The Hand shows up too, the same ninja organization tied to Daredevil's corner of the MCU, connecting this movie back to DeWolf's world whether Marvel spells it out or not. A handful of smaller names round out the roster. Boomerang, Mr. Negative, both still unconfirmed rumors built off set photos. Stack that many villains into one film and you've got the exact recipe that sank both The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, movies remembered for burying too many villains under too little room to matter. That comparison is fair. It's the first thing anyone who lived through either of those movies is going to think. But there's a difference worth naming. None of these street-level threats seem to be carrying the emotional weight of the film. Scorpion, Tombstone, The Hand, that reads as obstacle course. They're what Peter fights through on the way to the actual problem. Whether that distinction holds up once the movie's actually in front of us is the single biggest bet this film is making. One name is still missing from all of it. Remember the actress we said Marvel's gone to extraordinary lengths to hide? Sadie Sink took this role without an audition. She'd worked with director Destin Daniel Cretton before, on 2017's The Glass Castle, and that relationship was apparently enough for Marvel to offer her the part directly. What's stranger is what came after. She didn't get a script, not until she landed in London to actually start filming. That's a studio deciding one actor's character is dangerous enough to keep locked down even from the person playing her. It's worked. She's barely appeared in either trailer, and as of right now, nobody outside the production actually knows who she's playing. One of the film's producers has reportedly compared the secrecy directly to No Way Home's multiverse reveal, once considered the worst kept secret in franchise history because so much of it leaked before release, and suggested this one is being protected even more tightly. Whether that's confidence or nerves is hard to say from the outside, but it does mean Marvel is aware of exactly how much scrutiny this casting is under. What we do have is Tremel Tillman, confirmed as William Metzger, running a much darker version of the Department of Damage Control than the one that first showed up hunting Peter with drones back in Homecoming. In the comics, Metzger's a minor but pointed character. He led an anti-mutant militia, and in one particularly telling detail, used the tracking system from an early Sentinel, one of the mutant hunting robots out of X-Men lore, to hunt down and capture a young Jean Grey. If that detail is doing the work it looks like it's doing, it's a direct pointer toward exactly who Sink might be playing. That's the leading theory, and it's a strong one. Telepathic ability, an entity that can apparently force strangers to act against their will, mutant hunting infrastructure already built into the plot. Remember that Mexican McDonald's ad from the top of this video? The one everyone's been arguing about? It shows a young woman surrounded by pink energy concentrated around her hands and her forehead, which is exactly the kind of visual shorthand this franchise has used before to quietly confirm a power set without confirming a name. It's suggestive, it is not proof. There's a second theory worth taking just as seriously, and it loops all the way back to what's happening to Peter's body. Remember Disassembled, the arc where a telepathic mutant infects Spider-Man through nothing but proximity and drags a transformation out of him he never agreed to? If Sink's playing a version of that character instead, she might be the actual cause of everything happening to Peter's body. I'm not picking a winner here, because nobody actually can yet. Both theories are built on real evidence, and they point in genuinely different directions. One sets up mutants as this universe's next chapter. The other makes Peter's entire arc her fault from the very beginning. What's confirmed is smaller and stranger than either theory. Whoever she is, she's got some kind of psychic reach long enough to make ordinary people do things they wouldn't otherwise do, up to and including driving a tank through the middle of the city. Metzger's own line in the trailer sums up the situation better than any theory could. He's facing a threat he can't control, one he can't even see. Whoever's under that description, she stopped being a Spider-Man-sized problem a while ago. Zoom out far enough and this stops being one movie's problem. Metzger's presence alone is a signal. Damage Control is hunting something it can't see, and the man running that hunt has a comic history built entirely on anti-mutant paranoia in a franchise that's openly building toward its own X-Men. Whatever Brand New Day resolves, it's also laying track for a mutant saga that hasn't officially started yet. One comic thread already sits in reserve for whenever Marvel wants it. The comics eventually pair Mr. Negative with a dying Eddie Brock, aka Venom, curing his cancer and accidentally creating anti-Venom in the process. Nothing points to that happening in this movie. But Mr. Negative's rumored presence on its own is Marvel keeping a door unlocked for whenever it wants to walk back through it. There's also a rumored appearance from Florence Pugh's Yelena Belova, a character Kevin Feige has already confirmed will be central to Avengers Doomsday later this year. If that cameo is real, it means Brand New Day is actively assembling pieces for the next Avengers film, while pretending to stay small and street level. It might just mean Marvel's learned how to build the bridge without making the bridge the point. Producer Amy Pascal has reportedly described the mandate behind this film as going smaller, chasing emotional weight instead of universe-ending stakes, which runs directly against the assumption that superhero movies only work anymore at maximum scale. Deadpool and Wolverine already proved audiences will still show up in force for the right one. Whether Brand New Day proves the opposite case, that they'll show up for something quieter too, is a bet the studio's making with one of its biggest characters. Industry trackers have floated opening numbers in the low to mid hundreds of millions, rivaling some of the biggest debuts this franchise has ever had. But that's chatter built on pre-release estimates, and it'll stay that way until the actual weekend happens. What's going to stay with me is Peter, alone in a rundown apartment, talking to an AI he built himself, because there was nobody left who remembered him well enough to talk to. Every mentor test, every villain, every theory about who's hunting him, all of it is happening around a kid who chose isolation because it hurt less than watching two people he loves forget he existed. Whatever this movie gets right or gets wrong, that's the part it can't afford to lose. The evidence runs out here. The rest of it, we find out together, in a theater, the way it was always supposed to work. Case closed. For now. Every suit Peter's worn traces back to Tony Stark. Until this one. Tom Holland's Spider-Man has been running backward from a normal hero arc since Homecoming, and Brand New Day might be where it finally pays off. I broke down exactly how and why in another video, right here.